Welcome to Larry Reedy's America. This is episode Q13 of my book. And without further ado, let's get started. In my territory, the old 80-20 rule applied. 80% of my dealers were financially stable, but the remaining 20% were marginal and posed a constant worry from me about their ability to even stay in business. For my marginal dealers, I always tried to have a prospective replacement. I worked with these dealers, advising them on making money, living within their means. Unfortunately, some were excellent mechanics who had no clue as far as handling money. When it became critical, I would advise them to cut their losses and terminate their lease. I always had someone to take their place, so when one of the other territory managers had to close a station, Jack would ask me to lease the franchise in another guy's territory. I had no problem with that, except some of the older guys were making 3 times more money than I was. I was starting to get a little disenchanted with Sun's longevity-based salary structure as opposed to remuneration based on performance. My first big disappointment with the company occurred in my first year with the company. Sun owned a printing company and gave all the dealers service tickets for their customers' bills. I asked Harry Crawford to find out the company's wide expense for the free service tickets for the dealers. He had the information within 2 or 3 days. I then designed a very comprehensive service ticket that included a checklist which would help the dealer sell items that he might not think to check. The customer would also be confident that his automobile was being properly maintained. I named it the Sunoco Custom Car Care Service Order. I presented my plan to the boss and Jack and told them with the money saved and with my pricing structure, I estimated there would be a $400,000 flip, equating to at least a 20% increase in per service ticket for the dealers. A new service order would benefit the company because of tires, batteries, and accessories that Sun sold to dealers. It would also increase the dealer's profit margin. The boss made an appointment for me to present this to regional manager Dick Sterling. His reaction was the same that Crawford and Jack had. I left my service order that I printed at my expense and my analysis on first-year profitability. Dick sent my work to corporate headquarters in Philadelphia. 1 month later, a mandatory meeting was held in every district in the country to introduce my new work order with no changes in my pricing structure and my advice on selling to the dealers. After the meeting, the boss, Jack, and all the other territory managers were congratulating me. Dick Sterling called me with his congratulations, and I thanked him and asked him, when could I expect my bonus from Sun? He stuttered and stammered a bit and then told me he would call corporate and get back to me. Corporate told him they wouldn't divulge information about where the design or idea came from, and if it was someone in the district, that's just part of being a good company employee. Sterling said he was sorry. Harry Crawford was really upset, but the only thing he could do was move up my next raise by 2 months. That sounded fair. $50 for 2 months for me and save $400,000 for the company. Before I write about my second disappointment, I must write about a great dinner party Sun Corporate threw for us at the Lookout House in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. The wives were not included, but the real estate division, credit division, regional manager, our entire district staff, including office personnel, were. One of the territory managers and a good friend, Dick Heisel, was drinking quite a bit, and midway through the evening, he was getting sloppy drunk. I told him to cool it because if he made an ass out of himself, it would ruin his career. He assured me that he was okay. We finished dinner, and most of us ordered an after-dinner drink. When the waiter stopped at Dick's table, he ordered, "Give me the best cognac in the house," in this booming South voice he had. The boss looked very uncomfortable watching Dick make a spectacle of himself. When the drinks came, Dick chugged his cognac and then barfed all over the table. Dick stayed with Sun for about 8 years in the same job. He was a good guy, but he only had one eye. When I walked next to him, I was careful to make sure I was next to his left side, so he would not run into me. I would never ride in a car because his left eye was a good one. The right side of his vehicle was always banged up. It's time for my next company disappointment. I was being used more for finding dealers for station and other territories than taking care of my own. Jack invited Nancy and me to his house for dinner one evening, along with Nick and his wife. We all lived on the west side and had been to Jack and Dot's house several times. While we were having drinks, Jack asked me to stop by the office because he wanted to talk to me about my ability to recruit dealers. The next day I showed up at Jack's office to talk about my recruiting methods. I always thought it was elementary. I had 2 black books, one with tabs for all my stations, and the other book was with tabs for competitive dealers under each brand of gasoline. I would try to make 5 calls per day on competitive dealers. I introduced myself, made small talk, trying to find out a little personal business information. We would shake hands and exchange cards. I would go to the car, staple his business card to a blank page under the brand, such as Shell. I would write down the information that I acquired during our conversation and make a note in my day timer to stop by his dealership in 2 weeks. On my next visit, I would start a conversation with something that I learned from him on our first business. If he was a Cincinnati Reds fan, I'd bring up a great player, game-winning hit from a recent game. I would bring up work and ask him if he was happy with his current business. If he wasn't, he would let me know. I would let him know about Sun stations that were available or that might become available sometime soon. Many of the dealers were happy with their present arrangements, but when I was leaving, I would always ask, is there any Sunoco service station in this city in which you would be interested? Almost always there were 2 or 3 stations that I would write in my black book on his page. Jack told me that was brilliant. Part 2, here we go again. Jack had me present my recruiting plan to the boss and the regional manager. 2 months later, at a regional manager all over the country, the company introduced the method they wanted everyone to use to recruit dealers. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when I was rewarded the same way as the service tickets. My next $50 per month raise came in 2 months ahead of time. Meanwhile, since Nancy was pregnant with our 3rd child, I knew that I had to make more money, so I told Jack Smith that I was going to lease a station from Shell Oil Company. Jack's face went white. He told me that he should be with me when I talked to the boss because he was afraid Harry Crawford would have a heart attack. So I think Jack would have prepped the boss before our talk, but Crawford was speechless when I announced my plans. He wanted to know why I would leave the company with a promising career. I told him that the company was all about longevity, not performance. I added that I have performed all territory managers who have been here 10 to 25 years of service, and they made 2 to 3 times my income. Furthermore, I was disappointed in the lack of recognition and compensation for 2 programs that I designed. He asked me to stay and give him a chance to talk to corporate and get an exemption for me to get more money, and promised me another $50 a month effective immediately. I accepted with one caveat. If I stayed, I wanted to be promoted to a sales manager within 6 months. Absent a promotion, I would be history. 6 months later, as I promised, I turned in my letter of resignation. I told Nancy that I had resigned and I was going into business for myself. Nancy was due to have our 3rd child at any time. She asked me if I would have to go back to work, and I told her if I had to work 16 hours a day, that she would never have to work while we had a growing family. A couple of days later, Donna Lynn Reedy was born, December 14th, 1965, 11 months after Laura's birth. We now had 3 girls. Julie was the oldest of the 2, 2.5 years. Nancy just couldn't keep her hands off me. During my last 6 months with Son, I was making plans and arrangements to acquire a shell lease because I was reasonably confident Son would not come through with a promotion. During one of my prospective dealer interviews for Son, I met a dealer, Joe Law, who told me he was going to give up his lease on the Queensgate station because Queensgate pumped too much gas. That seems counterintuitive, but Joe preferred to concentrate on service work as opposed to pumping gas. He was in the progress of building a new station where he felt the volume would become more in line with his preferences. Joe's station was not my first choice. My friend Jack Sebastian had been toying with retiring from Shell at the Glenley Avenue Work Road station in Western Hills. I preferred the Western Hills station, but at the last minute, Jack decided against retirement, so I took what was available. I knew going in business was not going to be easy because we had a savings account of $500. We'll continue this on the next podcast. Thanks for listening. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And I will talk to you on the next podcast.